Hi, I'm Rachel Kramer Bussell, the editor-in-chief of Residence 11, a website and community that celebrates sensuality, romance, intimacy, and loving in a new age of human connection. In advance of our first live event happening on February 11th, 2023, the Residence 11 Desire Summit on Sex and Relationships, which will be held in Los Angeles and also live streamed worldwide, we're speaking with Lynn Brown Rosenberg, who's one of our speakers at the summit. So over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to be talking to Lynn. I'm going to tell you more about her. Lynn Brown Rosenberg is the author of the erotic memoir, My Sexual Awakening at 70, and has written articles for Salon, the Sunday Times of London, the Los Angeles Jewish Journal, the New York Jewish Week, Feller, and The Forward, and wrote a short film, Solo, that won a Golden Eagle Award. She spoke at the Mensa annual gathering in San Diego, California, and is currently at work on her fourth crime novel. And prior to writing books, she wrote screenplays. And in another life, Lynn was a professional pianist, vocalist, and songwriter. But writing is her passion and her joy. And you can learn more about her and get her book at lynnbrownrosenberg.com. Lynn is going to be speaking at the upcoming Desire Summit, talking on the topic of sex and aging, which we're also going to discuss today. And she'll also be talking about how sex changes as we age. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're watching this so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming interviews. Now, let's jump right in. Lynn, before I get to your writing career and what you do now, I want to go back in time and talk about what were you taught about sex growing up, and how did your views about sex change after, once you became an adult or later on?
I'll give you one example of many growing up that had a tremendous influence on me. And that is, I was on vacation with my parents. I was about, 16, 15, something like that. And they took me to Highland Springs, California. And we, there was a party for teens. So I went and I met a boy and we danced and we really got along. And he asked if I wanted to go for a walk. And I said, okay. And I was on safe grounds. I wasn't worried about anything. And sooner or later, we wound up on a chaise lounge kissing. But that's all we were doing was kissing. My parents found me and they said, "Get up, Lynn." And they told the boy to get away, go away. And then my mother said, anyone who enjoys sex is a prostitute.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was just one. There were many, many instances of this. And, I became repressed both emotionally and sexually.
Now, we're going to get to your sexual awakening at 70 that you wrote about in your memoir, but between when this happened with the boy and your sexual awakening, what did you think about sex, and how did it play a role in your life? How did that repression manifest itself?
I had a sexual desire, certainly when I got into my 20s. And I did have sex with a few men, maybe more than a few. And I had the desire, but I wasn't free because I had all these messages in my head from my parents. Sex, you're a prostitute if you enjoy sex. One time, when I was about 12, my mother asked me to come out on the patio with her. She wanted to talk to me, and she gave me what could be called the sex talk, but it was strange. And she started by visually with her hands describing what the boy does, what the girl does, and that I, of course, should not have sex before I married. Well, I married at 38. I didn't want a marriage like my parents had because they were so obsessed with each other, and me too. And if I was home 10 minutes late, they were worried about me.
Would
And
you
there was,
say
go ahead.
that attitude, sorry to interrupt you, was that common at the time, that way of thinking?
It was common. It was common, but I think they took it to an extreme because I was very, and they were very critical of me. You know, there's a lot more of this tale to tell. You know, that had a tremendous impact on me. And
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so I'm curious because you said, you still had these desires and you did have sex, but you couldn't, it sounds like you couldn't fully enjoy it because you had this voice in your head saying this is bad. Can you talk about what that dichotomy was like?
Sure. I didn't know a whole lot about sex. I just knew that I had the desire, and so when I had sex with someone, it was exciting, but I was not totally with it. My head was talking about a good girl and what I should or shouldn't do, and I never explored a thing about sex until I turned 70.
Now, I'm going to ask about that in a second, but on your website about your book, you write, I knew something significant was missing from my life. I didn't realize how significant until for the first time in my life, I had the good fortune of achieving a really powerful orgasm. And I'm curious, can you talk about how you knew something was missing if you hadn't had it yet?
It's a good question. How I knew something was missing. You know what? I only knew really in my later years because I don't know, I just didn't realize I was where I was at. And yeah, so I only had the realization of what I was missing much, much later.
And can you talk about this, some of what's in your book and what changed for you at age 70 that made you decide, okay, I'm going to pursue this thing that I've been thinking about for decades, but haven't actually gone after? What made 70 the point where you said, now is the time?
I was packing up to leave my condo. And so I was going through all kinds of stuff to see what I wanted to get rid of, what I wanted to keep, what I wanted to give away. And then I evaluated myself. And that's when I realized I hadn't had sex in 12 years after my husband died. And I was fed up with that. So I happened to be going to my urologist, and after she looked at me, she started to go out the room. And I said, I haven't had an orgasm in 12 years. And she said, go get some porn and a toy. Vibrator. So I did what the doctor ordered. I had never been in a sex store before, ever. So I went there and I parked. I sat in my car for about 10 minutes, worried about who I might run into. I didn't want anybody to see me there. But it turned out that it was, the people were really nice. And it was a pleasant experience, much a surprise to me. So then I tried what I bought, And I had my first orgasm in years.
That's
Decades.
amazing. I mean, all of that, especially that a doctor would recommend that, which they should, I think. But I don't know if enough doctors take that interest in,
I
if it's
don't think so. No one has ever, well, I haven't
a life
talked
issue.
about it. Hmm?
That's wonderful. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about after that? Like what opened up for you? How did that change your life and set you on this new path?
I was seeing a psychologist, and he had a lot to do with my sexual development at that point. I had told him, uh, he said he's heard it all. So I felt sort of comfortable talking to him about it. And so I told him that I, got this DVD and this toy. I said, but, I can't keep watching the same DVD all the time. And I don't want to go back to the sex store. And he said, there's free porn on the net. What? Porn on the net? I said, I don't know about that. I don't know if I'll do that. But I did. I usually say no before I say yes. That's something pretty common with me. So I thought about it, and I went ahead and found, some porn. And one in particular really engaged me. The woman was using her hands only on the man, and she was talking, and that's all she did was talk. It really, I was amazed by it. It really had a big effect on me.
What about it, if you can answer this? Like, what about that scene, especially because that sounds a little different than a lot of porn? What about that scene spoke to you?
Well, the fact that she didn't do anything else. In fact, I don't even think she put her hands on him until later. I think he started it. So, all she did was talk and touch. That's it. And that stuck with me. And I can tell you why if you want to go into it. How and why. So I went back to my doctor. I saw him weekly, and my psychologist. And I said, I'm watching the porn and I'm enjoying it, but I feel like I want an engagement with somebody. I want to be with somebody. And he said, there are free sex sites. And I said, oh no, no way. And I meant it at the time. And then I thought about it. And I thought, well, what would I say? If I do go on these websites, what would I say? And then I remembered the woman from the porn film. And I went back and used her words to start my dialogue with these guys.
That's so great.
This guy was amazing. He was just amazing. And so he had a big part of my opening up.
And what was that like that first time? I know we ran an excerpt from your book on the site, but what was that like that first time, doing something, even though it wasn't in person, it was online, but sexual with someone else after such a long gap?
It was so exciting. It really was. And in fact, because it was so exciting to me, I wanted to share it. That's how I came to write my book.
And out of all the things that you document in your book and your whole sexual journey, what would you say are one of the two biggest or most exciting of the sexual adventures you had?
It was all exciting. Each stage I went through was exciting. Um, I just, I got more and more excited the more things I did. And also during this time, I started writing sexual stories. And that really helped me too, oddly enough. I got excited writing my own stories, and they were just completely made up, but that was exciting too.
That makes sense. That's erotica is something I do a lot of, so I understand. And I think that because people can be really free, especially in fiction. I mean, you write both fiction and nonfiction, but I think there's something even more freeing sometimes about fiction because it's not you, it's the character.
Right.
Um, what is there anything you wish you'd tried sooner in terms of the things you did after 70? You feel like that
I
was
wish I
kind
had tried everything sooner. you know, uh, I just had no idea, and I was closed-minded because of my upbringing, and it took these stages that I went through with my urologist and my psychologist, and he was just amazing. So it was thrilling. Every part of it was thrilling, eye opening. Oh my God, this is possible. You know, the going to the porn, watching the DVDs. Um, it was just an amazing journey.
uh, I know you have readers who are in your age group, and you also told me you have a lot of younger readers who, many of whom were raised with a similar mindset by parents who told them sex is bad. What advice do you have for someone who was raised that way and perhaps still thinks that way, but is sort of sensing, okay, there's something else out there, or I don't have to, retain that negativity. How can people kind of cast off that shame, especially if they've had it for a long time, whether that's 30 years or 50 or 70 years?
First of all, the best thing to do is become aware of yourself, because that's really how this began. When I was in my condo and I was packing up, and I came to a realization. So my mind was open at that moment, and thereon, I would, so that's the first thing I would suggest. Really, if you're not totally with it and comfortable with sex, or if you hadn't in a long time, like me. Either way, well, let me just tell you, uh, my hairdresser used to come to my apartment to do my hair, and she wanted to buy my book, and she's like 40. And I said, "Oh no," I said, "this book wouldn't be for you." And she said, "Why not?" She said, "I was taught sex was bad." I said, "Okay." I just didn't want her to waste her money, but she bought it, and yeah. So I think, well, reading my book would give you an opportunity to see what someone else did to get out of this frame of mind.
And I'm also curious, do you have any advice for people who are in marriages or other long-term relationships and who feel like they don't want to necessarily leave the relationship, they want to be in it, but they do want to make a change to their sex life, whether or not they grew up thinking sex was bad, but maybe they just feel like it's gotten stale, or they feel like something's missing. how can they start to have that conversation with a partner without insulting, without saying, it's not you, it's not me, it's just, I want to change.
I actually did not have that conversation with my husband. We were married 15 years, and I was still with the same mindset. So we had sex, but I couldn't let myself go. I was just trapped. And at the very end, he died in our apartment. And but right before that, when he was very ill, I said to him, I wanted him to know how much I appreciated the love he gave me all those years. And he said something like, it's wonderful to hear. And he said something like, the only thing that was missing was a good sex life. And I said, yes. And so neither of us knew what to do for the other. It just was I wanted to, but it wasn't comfortable. It just didn't happen.
I'm curious, your sexual awakening after that, how did it change your life? I mean, not just your sex life, but including that, but did it change your life in other ways too?
Well, it was emotionally freeing. I had a pretty rough childhood. And it was just like I was a different person.
What would you say are the biggest obstacles to people in their 70s or older in terms of finding sexual satisfaction, whether they're single or partner?
I think some older people give up on sex. Instead of what I did, which I became more engrossed in it and excited, a lot of women figure they don't care about it anymore. So if you really don't care about it, I guess no problem. But if you do, then then it would be great if you could do something for yourself. And what was the second part of the question?
I think I just asked what are the biggest obstacles to finding sexual satisfaction. But yeah, do you have any advice for especially people who are 70 or older, just in terms of, enjoying themselves more, enjoying sex or trying something new, and or maybe getting ideas like you mentioned the porn that you watched? Is that something you'd recommend to older people?
I would. I mean, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or anything, but I would recommend it. It helped me. That's the best thing I can say.
So at the Desire Summit on February 11th, you'll be speaking about your erotic journey and the story of your memoir. Can you give us a little preview about what you'll be sharing and any sort of other thoughts you might have about how sex changes as we age?
I will be talking in more detail about these things, going more into what got me in this place to begin with. That's one thing I'll do. And then I will just talk about it in more detail, more depth.
And what are you working on next, whether in the sexual field or elsewhere?
I'm actually writing thrillers, psychological thrillers. I'm on my fourth. I hope they're going to be published soon, but I don't know. But anyway, that's what I'm doing.
And I do have one final question. So you said that you were inspired to write about these experiences because they were so life-changing. Is there anything else you can say about why it was important to you to not just have this journey, but to share it with the world?
Well, I think because I went through it, I thought there must be other women who are going through the same thing. And I really just thought maybe it would help them. And it really helped me because I finally could release the voices of my parents that
That's
were
wonderful.
stuck in my head.
Thank you for joining us today. You can
Thank
find
you.
out more about Lynn on her website, lynnbrownrosenberg.com, and you can hear more from Lynn at the Desire Summit on February 11th. Visit summit.residence11.com to find out more.
Thank you.